You're nothing but a Confederate-loving crawfish-eating inbred hillbilly who bought his law degree from a swap meet. Adam Schiff delivered this venomous attack with the confidence of a man who believed himself untouchable. The California congressman, former federal prosecutor and self-appointed guardian of democracy, stood at his microphone, his phone held high, live streaming the moment to his 2.3 million followers. Ladies and gentlemen, Schiff continued, his voice dripping with coastal condescension. Today, I expose Senator John Kennedy as the fraud he's always been. A fake folksy act designed to fool the American people into thinking he's one of them. The hearing room, packed with reporters and political observers, buzzed with nervous energy. This was supposed to be a routine oversight hearing on judicial nominations. Instead, it had become Schiff's personal theater for humiliation. Kennedy sat quietly at his designated spot, a rumpled figure in a modest brown suit that had seen better days. His readers perched on the end of his nose as he doodled what appeared to be crawfish on a yellow legal pad. To any observer, he looked like exactly what Schiff claimed, an out-of-his-depth country lawyer accidentally elected to the Senate. Schiff's production team. Yes, he'd brought a production team to a Senate hearing. Captured every angle as he continued his assault. This man, he gestured dismissively at Kennedy, wants us to believe he's some brilliant legal mind. Has anyone actually seen proof of this Oxford degree? He claims. I bet he got it from the same place he got that accent. The bargain bin of political theater. The Democrats on the committee shifted uncomfortably. Even they seemed to sense this was going too far. But Schiff was just getting started. He held up his phone, showing his live stream audience. Look at him, folks. He's literally doodling while I'm speaking. Probably can't even spell Constitution without help. He turned to his aide. Stage, whispering loud enough for everyone to hear. Can someone check if the senator needs help with his hearing aid? I don't think he's following along. Kennedy looked up briefly, smiled gently, and returned to his doodling. He mumbled something that sounded like, "These fancy phones sure are complicated." To no one in particular. This only emboldened Schiff. See, this is who Louisiana sends to the Senate. A man who can't operate a smartphone in 2024. A relic from a bygone era of segregation and ignorance. He was playing to his online audience now. Gesturing dramatically. I've faced down presidents and exposed corruption at the highest levels. Taking down this foghorn leghorn impersonator will be the easiest thing I've done all week. Schiff's staff was actively making memes in real time, posting Hillbilly Kennedy images with banjo music overlaid. The live stream comments were flying past. Destroy him. Adam. Kentucky Fried Kennedy. Send him back to the swamp. You know what the difference is between me and Senator Kennedy? Schiff asked rhetorically, pausing for effect. I've actually read the Constitution in English. Not whatever backwater dialect they speak in the bayou. A few nervous laughs rippled through the room. Kennedy continued doodling, now adding what looked like a small alligator to his crawfish drawing. Mr. Chairman, Schiff addressed the committee chair with false formality. I'd like to submit for the record that I'm concerned about Senator Kennedy's mental fitness. A man who responds to serious oversight questions with folksy sayings and fishing stories shouldn't be making decisions about federal judges. He pulled out a prepared folder thick with documents. I've done my research on the esteemed senator from Louisiana. His so-called legal career consists of representing swamp tour operators and crawfish farmers. This man wouldn't know constitutional law if it bit him on his now. Now Kennedy finally spoke, his voice soft and tinged with that distinctive Louisiana drawl. No need for that kind of language. My mama raised me better than that. He looked up from his doodles, his eyes twinkling behind his readers. Though I do appreciate you taking such an interest in my career. Congressman, that's mighty neighborly of you. Schiff's smile was predatory. Oh, he speaks. Tell us, Senator, what pearls of swamp wisdom do you have for us today? Maybe a story about your cousin wife or how you learned the law by wrestling alligators. The cruelty was breathtaking. Even some of Schiff's supporters in the gallery looked uncomfortable. But Schiff was riding high on his own performance. Convinced he was delivering a masterclass in political destruction, Kennedy carefully set down his pen and folded his hands. Congressman, I've been called worse by better people. But if you're done with your little show, maybe we could get to the actual business of this hearing. My little show. Schiff laughed, turning to his camera again. Ladies and gentlemen, the senator thinks exposing fraud is a show. This from a man who probably thinks Shakespeare is a fishing lure brand. He leaned forward aggressively. Let me be crystal clear. Senator Kennedy, you are an embarrassment to this institution. A walking stereotype that holds back progress and makes America look foolish on the world stage. Your fake folksiness might fool the rubes back home. But everyone in this room knows exactly what you are. A fraud playing dress up as a common man while serving corporate interests. Kennedy nodded thoughtfully, as if considering Schiff's words. Well, Congressman, you certainly seem to have strong opinions about me. I respect that. Freedom of speech is a beautiful thing. He paused, then added with a slight smile. Of course, there's also that old saying about glass houses and stones. But what do I know? I'm just a simple country lawyer. Simple is right. Schiff pounced. You just admitted it. Ladies and gentlemen, he admits he's simple. He turned back to Kennedy with theatrical pity. Senator, maybe you should leave the complex matters of governance to those of us with actual functioning brain cells. The hearing room was electric with tension. Schiff's staff continued their social media assault, now trending simpleton senator. His live stream viewer count had climbed to 500,000 and rising. Kennedy reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out what appeared to be an old pocket watch. He checked the time, then carefully placed it on the table next to a thin manila folder that had been sitting there all along. The folder was labeled in simple handwriting a Schiff Ethics Review. Congressman Kennedy said mildly, "You mentioned something about research. That's good. Research is important. I did a little research myself." He tapped the folder gently. "Would you like to compare notes?" Something in Kennedy's tone made Schiff pause. But only for a moment. His arrogance quickly reasserted itself. "Oh, this should be rich. What did you find?" "A recipe for possum stew with a side of constitutional violations." Kennedy's smile never wavered. "Something like that." He opened the folder with deliberate slowness, revealing neat stacks of documents, photographs, and what appeared to be transcript pages. "Though I have to warn you, Congressman, this particular recipe might be a bit hard for you to swallow." The change in atmosphere was subtle but unmistakable. The seasoned reporters in the room leaned forward. They'd covered John Kennedy before. They knew that behind the Country Lawyer Act was a razor-sharp legal mind. And they recognized the look in his eyes now. The look of a prosecutor who had just led his target exactly where he wanted them. Schiff, drunk on his own performance, and the adulation of his online audience, remained oblivious. "Please, Senator, enlighten us with your Bayou wisdom. I'm sure my followers would love to hear what passes for research in the swamps of Louisiana." Kennedy adjusted his readers and picked up the first document. "Well, since you asked so nicely, Congressman, let's start with something simple. Something even a poor inbred hillbilly like me can understand. Let's talk about truth." He paused, his eyes meeting Schiff's directly for the first time. "And more specifically, let's talk about all the times you've lied to the American people." The smile on Schiff's face flickered just for a moment. But it was enough. In that instant, the hunter realized he might have just become the prey. Kennedy lifted the first page from his folder with the careful precision of a man handling something precious. "Now, Congressman Schiff, you've spent a good bit of time today explaining how I'm too simple to understand complex matters. So, maybe you could help me understand something that's been puzzling me." He adjusted his readers, squinting at the document. "See, I've got here what appears to be a transcript from March 22, 2017. That's when you went on Meet the Press and told Mr. Chuck Todd and the American people that you had, and I'm quoting here, more than circumstantial evidence of collusion between Russia and the Trump campaign." Kennedy looked up, his expression innocent. "Now I'm just a simple country lawyer like you said. But that sounds pretty serious. More than circumstantial evidence. That's what we'd call a smoking gun where I come from." Schiff straightened in his chair, his confidence returning. "That's correct, Senator. Unlike some people in this room, I take national security seriously. I've seen classified evidence that." "Oh, classified evidence?" Kennedy interrupted gently, his voice full of wonder. "Well, that sounds mighty important. I bet that evidence was real compelling when you saw it in all those closed-door Intelligence Committee hearings." "Wasn't it?" "Absolutely," Schiff replied firmly. "The evidence was clear and convincing to anyone who actually understood the complexities of counterintelligence operations. Though I wouldn't expect someone who thinks complex means adding extra hot sauce to their gumbo to grasp such nuances." A few of Schiff's supporters chuckled. His live stream comments were flowing with fire emojis and destroyed messages. Kennedy nodded thoughtfully. Extra hot sauce. That's funny. You're a funny man, Congressman. But here's what's not funny. I happen to have the transcripts from those closed-door sessions you mentioned. The color drained slightly from Schiff's face. Those transcripts are classified. Were classified. Kennedy corrected mildly. They were declassified last year. Funny thing about declassified documents. Even as simple folk can read them now. He pulled out a thick stack of papers. All 53 transcripts. In fact, would you like me to refresh your memory about what your witnesses actually said? Without waiting for an answer, Kennedy began reading. Let's see here. Director of National Intelligence James Clapper behind closed doors. I never saw any direct empirical evidence that the Trump campaign or someone in it was plotting, conspiring with the Russians to meddle with the election. He flipped to another page. Oh, here's another good one. CIA Director John Brennan. I don't know if such collusion existed. Another page. FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe. We have not been able to prove any conspiracy. Kennedy looked up at Schiff, whose face was now noticeably red. Now, Congressman, I may have gone to what you called a swap meet law school. But where I come from, no evidence, and more than circumstantial evidence don't mean the same thing. Could you help me understand that those witnesses were being cautious with their language? Schiff started cautious? Kennedy's eyebrows rose. Well, let's see how cautious you were with your language. He pulled out a tablet and connected it to the hearing room's display system. My staff. Yes, Congressman. Even your hillbillies have staff. Put together a little video. Just a few clips of you on various news programs. Should we watch? Before Schiff could object, Kennedy pressed play. The screen filled with a montage of Schiff appearances. CNN, March 2017. The evidence is more than circumstantial. I can't go into details. But it's damning. MSNBC. April 2017. We have evidence of collusion in plain sight. ABC, May 2017. There is direct evidence of deception. UPS. June 2017. The Trump campaign colluded with Russia. I've seen the proof. The montage continued. Clip after clip. Show after show. Schiff definitively stating he had seen evidence of collusion. The counter on the screen showed 73 appearances by the time it ended. The hearing room was dead silent. Even Schiff's live stream comments had slowed, replaced by question marks and confused emojis. Kennedy removed his readers and cleaned them slowly. 73 times. Congressman, you went on television 73 times and told the American people you had evidence that you knew didn't exist. Where I come from, we have a word for that. This is a gross mischaracterization. Schiff sputtered. The word is lying. Kennedy continued calmly. Lying, even as hillbillies can spell that one. Schiff's face was now bright red. How dare you? I was protecting sensitive intelligence methods and sources. Oh, you were protecting something. All right, Kennedy agreed. But it wasn't America. Let me show you what you were protecting. He pulled out another document. This is an email from your communications director to your chief of staff dated April 2, 2017. Subject line. Russia narrative strategy. Kennedy read. The boss wants us to keep pushing the collusion story. He knows the evidence is thin, but says the media cycle is more important than the details. Keep booking him on shows. The more he says it, the more it becomes truth. The hearing room erupted. Reporters were frantically typing. Several Democratic committee members were studiously avoiding eye contact with Schiff. That's taken out of context. Schiff shouted, his composure cracking. Context? Kennedy pulled out more papers. All right, let's give it some context. Here's an email from you to your staff dated April 3rd. The very next day. Quote, great job on the bookings. Remember, confidence sells. If I say we have evidence forcefully enough, no one will question it. The goal is to keep Trump on defense, not to prove anything. Schiff stood up abruptly. These are illegally obtained documents. This is a violation of. Sit down, Congressman. Chairman Graham said firmly. These appear to be documents obtained through proper FOIA requests. Continue. Senator Kennedy. Kennedy nodded gratefully. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, Congressman Schiff, you mentioned earlier that I wouldn't know constitutional law if it bit me. Well, turns out I do know a little something about one particular law. 18 U.S. Code Section 1001. That's the one about making false statements. Lying to the American people on TV isn't technically illegal. But it sure is interesting when we look at what else you were doing. He pulled out another set of documents. These are your financial disclosures from 2017 to 2019. Notice anything interesting about your speaking fees? The screen showed Schiff's reported income. The speaking fees had jumped from $25 in 2016 to over $400 by 2018. Seems like lying about Russian collusion was mighty profitable for you. Kennedy observed. All those speeches to anti-Trump groups. Those book deals. Those consulting contracts. All built on a foundation of lies you told the American people. Schiff's staff was frantically whispering to him. His live stream viewer count was dropping precipitously. Comments were turning. Wait, is this true? Did Schiff lie to us? WTF is happening? Kennedy wasn't finished. But here's the part that really puzzles me. Congressman. And remember, I'm just a simple Bayou lawyer. So maybe you can explain this. He pulled out a final document from the first section. This is a transcript of a call between you and a CNN producer recorded by CNN for their own records. Legal recording before you ask. The date is March 20th, 2017, 2 days before your Meet the Press appearance. He began reading. Producer Adam, we need you to be strong on the collusion story. Can you deliver? Schiff, don't worry. I'll say I have evidence. Once it's out there, it becomes the narrative. Producer, but do you actually have evidence? Schiff, does it matter? The story is what matters. The hearing room was in chaos. Schiff's face had gone from red to white. His hands were shaking as he gripped the table. Kennedy carefully placed all the documents back in his folder. Now, Congressman, you called me a lot of names today. Hillbilly inbred simple. And you know what? Maybe I am simple, but I'm simple enough to know the difference between truth and lies. And I'm simple enough to believe that a man who serves in Congress ought to tell the American people the truth. He paused, then added with a slight smile. Even my crawfish know better than to lie. Of course, they're Louisiana crawfish, probably smarter than those fancy California ones. Schiff tried to rally. This is a hit job. A partisan attack. These documents are all publicly available through proper channels. Kennedy finished. See, that's the thing about lies. Congressman, they have a way of catching up to you. Like my grandpappy used to say, you can put perfume on a pig, but it's still going to smell like bacon. He looked directly at Schiff. You spent 3 years perfuming that pig. Congressman, but we can all smell the bacon now. One of Schiff's staffers quietly got up and left the room. Then another. His communications director was typing furiously on her phone. Her face pale. Kennedy noticed and nodded sympathetically. Your staff seems to be remembering some urgent appointments. Can't say I blame them. Nobody wants to be standing next to the barn when the smell gets too strong. He opened the second section of his folder. Now, should we move on to how you manipulated the FISA process? Or would you like a minute to maybe apologize to the American people for lying to them 73 times? Schiff's response was barely audible. I stood by my assessment based on the information. Your assessment? Kennedy's voice remained gentle, but there was steel underneath. Congressman, where I come from, we have another saying. You can't polish a turd. Though I'll admit, you gave it one hell of a try. The live stream numbers were plummeting. #SchiffLied was beginning to trend. And they were only through the first folder. Kennedy smiled that gentle smile again. Ready for round 2, Congressman? Or do you need to check with your followers first? Oh, wait. He glanced at Schiff's phone where the viewer count was dropping like a stone. Looks like they're already giving you their answer. Kennedy took a slow sip of water from his glass. The simple gesture somehow commanding the attention of the entire room. He set it down carefully as if performing a ritual. Then opened the second section of his folder. Now, Congressman Schiff, he began, his voice taking on the cadence of a storyteller. Before we dive into this next part, I want to tell you a little story about my mimosas gumbo recipe. You'll indulge a simple country lawyer, won't you? Schiff, still reeling from the first round, managed to sneer. Oh, please, more folksy wisdom. This is exactly what I'm talking about. Now, Kennedy interrupted gently. Let me finish. See, my Mima had the best gumbo in St. Mary Parish. Secret recipe passed down for generations. One day, my cousin Boudreaux, he decided to improve it. Started changing ingredients, adding this, Removing that. Telling everyone it was still Mima's original recipe. Kennedy's eyes twinkled behind his readers. Well, when Mima found out, she said something I'll never forget. She said, "Johnny, when you change the ingredients, but keep the name the same, that ain't cooking, that's lying." He pulled out a thick document. Which brings us to your memo, Congressman. The one where you changed the ingredients but kept calling it the truth. The room tensed. Everyone remembered the Schiff memo. The Democratic response to the Nunes memo that had exposed FISA abuse. It had been one of Schiff's crowning moments. Or so he'd thought. I need help understanding something, Kennedy continued, scratching his head in apparent confusion. See, I've got here your memo. The one you released to counter Chairman Nunes's memo about FISA abuse. You said his memo was false. Misleading. And what was that colorful phrase? Oh yes, a grotesque abuse of the intelligence process. Schiff straightened, some confidence returning. That's correct. The Nunes memo was a partisan hit job that endangered national security by revealing the truth. Kennedy asked innocently. Because that's what I'm having trouble with. See, I've got here the original FISA applications. All 4 of them fully declassified now. He held up a stack of papers. And funny thing, everything Chairman Nunes said was in them. It's actually in them. He began reading. The Nunes memo said the FBI failed to inform the FISA court that the Steele dossier was funded by the DNC and Clinton campaign. Let's check the FISA application. Yep, no mention of it. Nunes was right. That's a grotesque oversimplification. Schiff started. Is it? Kennedy flipped pages. Nunes said the FBI used media reports to corroborate the dossier when those reports were actually based on the dossier itself. What we call circular reporting. Let's see. Yep. Here it is. Yahoo News article cited as corroboration. But Steele was the source for that article. 2. Nunes was right again. Kennedy looked up with exaggerated confusion. Now, Congressman, you went on every TV show in America saying Nunes was lying. But these documents show he was telling the truth. How do you square that circle? The Nunes memo cherry-picked facts without context. Cherry-picked. Kennedy pulled out another document. Well, let's look at your memo. Then, the one that was supposed to set the record straight. You know what's interesting? I've got here the first draft of your memo before it was edited. Would you like to know what changed? Schiff's face went pale again. How did you FOIA? Is a wonderful thing, Kennedy said mildly. Amazing what you can get when you ask nicely. Now let's see what got edited out of your truth-telling memo. He put on his readers and began comparing pages. Original draft. The FISA application could have been more transparent about the source of funding. Final version. That line's gone. Poof. Disappeared like a crawfish in muddy water. Original draft. The FBI should have disclosed Steele's bias against Trump. Final version changed to the FBI properly included Steele's background. Now that's what I call creative editing. Kennedy looked up at Schiff, whose hands were now visibly trembling. But here's my favorite one. Original draft. Questions remain about the verification of the dossier claims. Final version. The FBI followed all proper procedures in verifying information. He set the papers down carefully. Congressman, you changed questions remain to proper procedures. That's not editing. That's fiction writing. You turned doubts into certainties. Concerns into confirmations. You changed the whole recipe. But still called it gumbo. Those were editorial decisions made for clarity. Schiff protested weakly. Clarity? Kennedy pulled out another document. This is an email from your staff member who helped write the memo. She resigned last year. Conscience got the better of her. She writes, Adam is demanding we remove anything that validates the Nunes memo. He's literally rewriting facts. I can't be part of this anymore. The hearing room was riveted. Schiff's remaining staff members were all intently studying their phones, avoiding eye contact with their boss. Kennedy continued reading. He made us change the FBI failed to verify to the FB took appropriate steps. He made us change no corroboration to multiple sources. He's asking us to lie to the American people. And I won't do it. But wait, Kennedy said, his voice taking on a harder edge. There's more. See, changing words in a memo is one thing. But you didn't stop there. Did you, Congressman? He pulled out a series of transcripts. These are the classified transcripts from the Intelligence Committee hearings on FISA abuse. The ones you controlled as chairman. The ones you edited before releasing to the public. Schiff stood up abruptly. Those transcripts were properly reviewed for classified information. Sit down, Congressman, Kennedy said, his Foley demeanor dropping for just a moment, revealing the steel underneath. You'll want to be sitting for this. He began reading from 2 documents side by side. Original transcript witness testimony. We did not verify the Steele dossier before using it for the FISA application. Your edited version. We followed verification procedures for the information in the FISA application. The changes were staggering. Witness after witness, statement after statement. Schiff had altered the meaning, sometimes completely reversing what was actually said. You turned no into yes. Didn't into did dear failed into succeeded. Kennedy summarized. You didn't just edit for classification, Congressman. You rewrote reality. He pulled out one final document from this section. But here's the one that really gets me. This is from FBI attorney Kevin Kleinmuth's testimony. Original statement. I altered the email to change its meaning. Your version. I clarified the email for accuracy. Kennedy removed his readers and looked directly at Schiff. Congressman Klein-Smith pled guilty to falsifying that email. He admitted in federal court that he lied. And you changed his confession into a vindication. That's not spin. That's not politics. That's obstruction of justice. The room was in uproar. Reporters were shouting questions. Democratic committee members were fleeing for the exits. Schiff's live stream had completely crashed, his phone dark on the table. Now, Kennedy said, returning to his Foley demeanor as quickly as he dropped it, you might be wondering how a simple bayou lawyer like me got all these documents. Truth is, it wasn't that hard. See, when you lie as much as you have, Congressman, you leave a trail wider than a Louisiana river. He gestured to the pile of evidence. Every edited word, every changed meaning, every fabrication, it's all here in black and white. You thought you were being clever. But you were just being criminal. Schiff's attorney, when had he arrived, was whispering urgently in his ear. Schiff pushed him away. This is a setup. These documents are fake. This is fake. Kennedy smiled sadly. Congressman, the only thing fake in this room is your credibility. Well, that and maybe your concern for national security. You spent years claiming to protect America while you were really just protecting your narrative. He closed the folder gently. My Mima, she had another saying. You can fool some folks with fake gumbo. But eventually they're going to want to see the real recipe. Well, Congressman, we've all seen your recipe now. And it turns out the main ingredient was lies with a side of more lies garnished with lies. Kennedy stood up and stretched as if working out kinks from sitting too long. Mr. Chairman, I think we need a short recess. Congressman Schiff looks a little must be all that California's sunshine wearing off. As the chairman called for a 15-minute recess, Kennedy gathered his folders carefully. He looked at Schiff, who sat frozen in his chair, his face ashen, his political career crumbling in real time. Don't worry, Congressman, Kennedy said kindly. We're only about halfway done. Plenty more recipes to share. You might want to call your lawyer back. Oh, and maybe CNN, too, though something tells me they might not be as eager to book you after this. As Kennedy walked past Schiff's table, he paused. You know, you were right about one thing. I am just a simple country lawyer. But sometimes, Congressman, simple is all you need when the truth is on your side. The recess began with Schiff still sitting motionless. His staff gone, his phone dead, his lies exposed for all the world to see. And they were only on folder 2 of 5. When the hearing reconvened, the atmosphere had shifted dramatically. Half of Schiff's staff seats were empty. The press section, however, was overflowing. Reporters who had been covering other hearings had rushed in, sensing political blood in the water. CNN and MSNBC, who had been carrying Schiff's live stream, were now broadcasting the hearing with Kieran's reading, breaking Schiff documents under scrutiny. And questions arise about Intelligence Committee leaks. Schiff had used the recess to attempt damage control. But his usually perfect hair was slightly disheveled, his designer tie askew. He kept checking his phone, watching his Twitter followers disappear in real time. He'd lost 200,000 in 15 minutes. Kennedy ambled back to his seat, looking refreshed. He'd spent the recess chatting amiably with the janitor about the best spots for bass fishing. As if he hadn't just destroyed a colleague's career with surgical precision. Well, now Kennedy began settling into his chair with the comfort of a man in his favorite recliner. I hope everyone had a nice break. Congressman Schiff, you feeling better? You look a little green around the gills. As we say back home. Schiff tried to project strength. Senator, your theatrical display of doctored documents won't distract from doctored. Kennedy's eyebrows rose in innocent surprise. Oh my, that's a serious accusation. You know what? You're right to be skeptical. In this day and age, you can't trust everything you see. He pulled out his phone, handling it awkwardly. These fancy gadgets can do all sorts of things. Edit videos, fake documents, all kinds of mischief. He fumbled with the phone, nearly dropping it. Excuse me, Congressman, but could you help me with something? I'm trying to understand this whole metadata thing. My grandson tried to explain it, but he shrugged helplessly. Schiff, despite everything, couldn't resist the opportunity to demonstrate superiority. Metadata is simply data about data, Senator. It shows when a file was created, modified, accessed. It's basic digital forensics. Digital forensics, Kennedy exclaimed with delight. That sounds mighty impressive. So, like if someone was to leak classified information to a reporter, there would be metadata showing when they accessed the files and when they made contact. That's a crude oversimplification, but essentially Schiff stopped mid-sentence. Realizing the trap, Kennedy's smile was beatific. Well, thank you for that education, Congressman. That's going to make this next part much easier to understand. He opened his third folder, revealing what appeared to be phone records and digital logs. See, after your helpful explanation, even a simple fellow like me can understand these phone records from the major news outlets. Ain't technology wonderful? Shows every call when it was made, how long it lasted. He put on his readers and squinted at the papers. Now, what's got me puzzled is this pattern I'm seeing. Maybe you can help me understand it, seeing as you're so smart about these things. He held up a chart. January 12, 2018. Closed-door Intelligence Committee briefing ends at 2:47 p.m. Classified briefing about Russian operations. At 2:52 p.m. That's 5 minutes later. Your cell phone makes a call to. He squinted at the paper. A Mr. Kendelian at NBC News, 13-minute call. He looked up innocently. Now, that's probably just coincidence, right? Schiff's attorney was whispering urgently in his ear again. Kennedy continued. February 8, 2018. Committee briefing on FICA applications ends at 3:15 p.m. At 3:19 p.m. You call Natasha Bertrand at Politico. 8-minute call. Another coincidence, I'm sure. He flipped through more pages. March 22, April 5, April 18. My goodness, Congressman, you sure do like to call reporters right after classified briefings. Must be talking about baseball or something, right? Those calls were about scheduling and general matters. Schiff protested. General matters. Kennedy pulled out another document. Well, let's see what those reporters wrote right after your general matters calls. He began reading headlines. Sources say new evidence shows Russian collusion. Published 3 hours after your call. Intelligence officials concerned about Trump ties published the morning after your call. FICE application reveals damning details. Published 2 hours after your call. He looked up with exaggerated confusion. Congressman, it's the darnest thing. Every time you called these reporters, they had breaking news about classified information within hours. It's almost like, he paused dramatically, you were leaking classified information. But that can't be right. Can it? That would be a federal crime. The hearing room was dead silent, except for the sound of reporters typing furiously. Kennedy pulled out a tablet. Now remembering what you taught me about digital forensics, I had my staff, bright young folks way smarter than me, analyze something interesting. See, we got these phone records all legal like through proper channels. But we also got something else. He connected the tablet to the display system. This is what my smart young staff calls a correlation analysis. I don't really understand it, but they tell me it shows how certain phrases from classified briefings showed up in news articles. Would you look at that? The exact phrases word for word appearing in news stories hours after you made phone calls. The screen showed classified phrases highlighted in yellow next to identical phrases in news articles with timestamps showing Schiff's calls in between. But here's the part that really has me scratching my head. Kennedy continued, we got hold of something real interesting. Seems one of these reporters, they recorded your calls for their own protection. They said reporters do that sometimes, especially when dealing with sensitive sources. Schiff shot to his feet. That's illegal. You can't actually. Kennedy interrupted gently. It's perfectly legal in the District of Columbia. One-party consent. You'd know that if you were as smart about law as you claim to be. But let's listen to just a little bit. Shall we? He pressed play on the tablet. The audio was crystal clear. Schiff's voice. I can't be quoted directly. But you can say sources familiar with the committee's work. The key detail is that the FISA application mentioned Trump Tower specifically. Reporter's voice. Adam, are you sure you should be telling me this? This sounds classified. Schiff. I'm the chairman. I decide what's classified. Besides, the public has a right to know. Reporter. But if this gets traced back. Schiff. It won't. I've been doing this for years. Just write the story. Kennedy stopped the recording. The hearing room erupted. Several Democratic senators were openly staring at Schiff in horror. The press section was in chaos. Reporters shouting questions. Years. Kennedy repeated thoughtfully. You said you've been doing this for years. Well, let's see just how many years. He pulled out a thick binder. My staff went back and cataloged every leak of classified intelligence information from the House Intelligence Committee from 2017 to 2023. There were 247 unauthorized disclosures. He held up the phone records. Care to guess how many happened within 24 hours of you making calls to reporters? 200. That's an 87% correlation. Congressman, even a simple country lawyer like me knows that ain't coincidence. Schiff's face had gone from pale to gray. His hands were shaking so badly he couldn't hold his water glass. But wait, Kennedy said, his voice taking on an edge of steel. It gets worse. See, leaking classified information to make yourself look important. That's bad enough. But you didn't just leak to American reporters. Did you? He pulled out another set of documents. These are communications between you and Ms. Natalia Smirnova. Pretty name. Russian name. She was working at the Russian embassy as a cultural attaché. Kennedy made air quotes. That's what they call intelligence officers these days. Isn't it? The room gasped collectively. Now, you probably thought you were being clever using encrypted apps and all that fancy technology. But here's the thing about technology. It's only as smart as the person using it. And Congressman, you made one little mistake. You backed up your encrypted messages to your iCloud. And when the FBI got a warrant for your iCloud as part of a counterintelligence investigation, well, he held up printed messages. March 15, 2019. You to Miss Smirnova. The committee is looking into Deutsche Bank records next week. April 2, 2019. Trump's tax returns are more complex than we thought. May 18, 2019. We are shifting focus to the Mueller report. Kennedy looked up, his folksy demeanor completely gone. You were telling Russian intelligence what your committee was investigating. You were giving aid and comfort to a foreign adversary. Where I come from, Congressman, we have a word for that. It's called treason. Schiff tried to speak, but no words came out. His attorney was pulling at his arm, trying to get him to leave. Oh, we're not done yet, Kennedy said, his voice now hard as granite. See, Ms. Smirnova, she got arrested last year. Caught in a counterintelligence operation. And you know what she did? She made a deal. Gave up all her assets. Including you. He pulled out a document marked with FBI seals. This is her sworn statement. She says you provided her with classified intelligence assessments in exchange for, well, let's see what you got in return. He read subject. Schiff received multiple payments totaling $180 through offshore accounts, as well as opposition research on political opponents compiled by Russian intelligence services. The hearing room was in complete chaos. Security guards had moved closer to Schiff, who looked like he might collapse at any moment. CNN had cut away from their regular programming to cover the bombshell revelations. The Chiron now read, "Breaking Schiff, accused of treason in Senate hearing." Kennedy gathered his papers slowly, deliberately. You know, Congressman, when you called me an inbred hillbilly this morning, I wasn't offended. Know why? Because I knew what was in these folders. I knew that by the end of today, everyone would see who you really are. And he stood up, looking down at the broken man before him. You leaked classified information 216 times. You compromised national security for TV appearances. You sold intelligence to Russian operatives for money and political dirt. You betrayed your oath, your office, and your country. Kennedy's voice dropped to almost a whisper. But everyone in the room heard every word. Where I come from, we have a saying, when you're in a hole, stop digging. But you, Congressman, you just kept digging. And now you're so deep. I don't think even your fancy California lawyers can dig you out. He turned to the chairman. Mr. Chairman, I think we need to contact the FBI. We have evidence here of multiple federal crimes, including violations of the Espionage Act. Congressman Schiff should be taken into custody immediately. As if on cue, FBI agents entered the hearing room. They'd been waiting outside, briefed on what Kennedy would be revealing. Schiff finally found his voice. This is a setup. This is political persecution. I demand. The only thing you'll be demanding is a good lawyer. Kennedy interrupted. And maybe some of that California sunshine in federal prison. I hear Leavenworth gets pretty cold in the winter. As the FBI agents approached Schiff, Kennedy added one final thought. You know what the real tragedy is, Congressman? You had a chance to serve your country honorably. Instead, you chose to serve yourself. You chose fame over duty, money over integrity, and lies over truth. And now, well, now you get to live with those choices. The agents read Schiff, his Miranda rights, as the entire room watched in stunned silence. The man who had spent years as the face of the resistance, who had positioned himself as a defender of democracy, was being arrested for betraying that very democracy. Kennedy picked up his folders and prepared for the next round. They weren't even close to done yet. As the FBI agents positioned themselves near Schiff, not arresting him yet, but making their presence known, Kennedy settled back into his chair with the patient demeanor of a fisherman who knows the fish is already hooked. He just needed to reel it in slowly. The hearing room had transformed into something resembling a crime scene. 3 more of Schiff's staffers had fled during the chaos, leaving only his lawyer and one terrified aide. The press section was standing room only, with reporters from international outlets now crowding in. The story had gone global. Schiff somehow was still in his seat. His expensive suit was soaked with sweat. His hands trembled uncontrollably. But his ego, that tremendous overwhelming ego, kept him from running. He still believed he could talk his way out of this. Mr. Chairman, Kennedy addressed Senator Graham, I know folks might be getting tired, but if you'll indulge me, I've got just a couple more things that need addressing. See, we've talked about lying, about leaking, about treason even, but there's one more thing that's been bothering this simple country lawyer. He opened his 4th folder. This one noticeably thicker than the others. Money. Specifically, foreign money. More specifically, Ukrainian money. Schiff's lawyer whispered urgently in his ear. But Schiff pushed him away. This is ridiculous. I've been a champion of Ukrainian democracy. A champion? Kennedy's eyebrows rose. Well, that's one way to put it. Another way might be a prophet. But let me not get ahead of myself. Let's start with something simple. He pulled out a financial disclosure form. This here's your financial disclosure from 2018. Says your net worth was about $2 million. Not bad for a public servant. But this here, he pulled out another form, is your disclosure from 2023. Net worth $8.7 million. That's quite a jump. Congressman, you must have some mighty fine investment advice. My investments are all legal and properly disclosed. Legal? Kennedy scratched his head. Well, now that's interesting. Let's talk about some of these legal investments. He pulled out a series of bank records. These here are wire transfers from various Ukrainian entities to accounts controlled by your leadership PAC. Now PACs can take money from lots of places. But foreign money, that's a big no-no. He began reading March 2019 $450 from Burisma Holdings to Americans for Progress PAC. That's your PAC, isn't it, Congressman? Schiff's face had gone from gray to white. That was illegitimate. April 2019, $320 from private bank to the same PAC. May 2019, $275 from NAFTA. June 2019, $500 from something called the Ukrainian Democracy Foundation. Kennedy looked up. That's a lot of Ukrainian money flowing to your PAC right around the time you were leading the charge on Trump's impeachment over a Ukraine phone call. Funny timing, wouldn't you say? Those were legitimate donations for promoting democracy. Were they? Now, Kennedy pulled out another document. Here's interesting. It's the incorporation papers for the Ukrainian Democracy Foundation. Says it was founded in February 2019. Just 1 month before they sent you $500,000. And look who founded it. Mr. Igor Pasternak. Ring a bell. Schiff remained silent, but his trembling had intensified. No. Well, let me refresh your memory. Mr. Pasternak is a Ukrainian arms dealer who just happened to host a fundraiser for you at his California mansion. A fundraiser that raised $2.3 million in one night. Mighty generous for a foreign national who's not supposed to be contributing to American political campaigns. Kennedy pulled out photographs. These are from that fundraiser. There's you with Mr. Pasternak. There's you with several other Ukrainian businessmen who, according to our intelligence services, have ties to Ukrainian intelligence. And there's you signing something. Want to know what you are signing? Without waiting for an answer, Kennedy produced another document. It's a consulting agreement between you and the Ukrainian Democracy Foundation. Says here, you'll provide strategic advisory services for $150 a month. That's $1.8 million a year. Congressman, pretty good money for advising. The hearing room was in stunned silence. Even the seasoned reporters looked shocked at the brazenness of the corruption being exposed. But here's where it gets really interesting. Kennedy continued warming to his theme. See, I was curious what kind of strategic advice you were providing. So, I got hold of some emails between you and Mr. Pasternak. Want to hear some? He didn't wait for permission. January 2020. You to Pasternak. The impeachment is moving forward. This will benefit our mutual interests. February 2020. Pasternak to you. Excellent work. The next payment will be doubled as a bonus. March 2020. You toast. I can ensure continued congressional support for military aid. What specific systems are you looking to sell? Pasternak's response. Whatever generates the highest profit margins. Your commission will be 15%. Kennedy looked up. Commissioned Congressman, were you getting kickbacks on arms sales to Ukraine? Schiff's lawyer was now physically trying to pull him from his seat. But Schiff seemed paralyzed. Oh, but it gets better, Kennedy said, pulling out more documents. Or worse, depending on your perspective. See, Mr. Pasternak wasn't just any arms dealer. According to the FBI, he was also feeding information to Ukrainian intelligence services. Information about congressional deliberations, classified briefings, intelligence assessments, information that only someone on the Intelligence Committee would have. He produced a series of intercepted communications. These are messages between Ukrainian intelligence officers discussing their American asset. They refer to him as the congressman. Here's one from April 2020. The congressman provided excellent intelligence on the administration's Ukraine strategy. Payment has been authorized. Another from June 2020. The congressman assures us military aid will continue. He requests additional compensation for his efforts. And here's my favorite from August 2020. The congressman wants to increase his monthly retainer. Given the value of his intelligence, this is approved. Kennedy sat down the papers and looked directly at Schiff. You weren't just taking Ukrainian money. Congressman, you were selling American intelligence to Ukraine. You were a paid foreign agent while serving as chairman of the Intelligence Committee. But wait, Kennedy said, his voice taking on a harder edge. There's more. See, when you were pushing so hard for Trump's impeachment over that Ukraine phone call, you left out some important details. Like the fact that you were on the payroll of Ukrainian interests. Like the fact that you had financial incentives to protect Ukrainian aid. Like the fact that you were compromised 6 ways from Sunday. He pulled out a transcript. This is from your secret meeting with the Ukrainian Prosecutor General in August 2019. 1 month before the Trump phone call. You told him, and I quote, "Don't worry about any investigations. I'll make sure Congress protects Ukraine's interests. Trump won't be a problem much longer." The implications were staggering. Schiff had been working with Ukraine to undermine a sitting president while taking Ukrainian money. Now I'm just a simple country lawyer, Kennedy said, but where I come from, taking money from a foreign government while using your official position to benefit that government is called bribery. And doing it while serving on the Intelligence Committee. Well, that's espionage. He pulled out one final set of documents from this folder. These are your text messages with your Ukrainian contacts during the impeachment hearings. You were literally coordinating your questioning with Ukrainian officials. You were sharing confidential committee information. You were assuring them that Trump would be removed and aid would flow freely. Kennedy read one particularly damning text. Shift to Ukrainian contact. The impeachment is certain. I control the narrative. Your investments in me will pay off handsomely. The hearing room erupted. Reporters were shouting questions. The FBI agents had moved closer to Schiff. Ready to act on the chairman's word. Kennedy stood up. looking down at the ruins of Adam Schiff. You called the president a Russian asset while you were literally a paid Ukrainian agent. You accused others of corruption while taking millions in foreign bribes. You led an impeachment based on a phone call while you were having secret meetings and taking secret payments. His voice rose slightly, the closest he'd come to showing real anger. Do you know what the real tragedy is? Congressman, Ukraine is fighting for its survival against Russian aggression. They need real allies, honest allies. Instead, they got you, a corrupt politician willing to sell out anyone and anything for money. Kennedy turned to Chairman Graham. Mr. Chairman, we need to add violations of the Foreign Agent Registration Act, bribery of a public official, and espionage to the list of charges. The FBI needs to freeze all of Congressman Schiff's assets immediately as they appear to be the proceeds of criminal activity. Schiff finally found his voice, though it was weak and desperate. This is all lies. I was fighting for democracy. I was. You were lining your pockets. Kennedy interrupted. And you know what? We've got the receipts. Every wire transfer, every payment, every bribe. It's all here in black and white. Or should I say in green and white? Dollar green. He gathered the documents carefully. You know, Congressman, when you called me a hillbilly this morning, you probably thought you were being clever. But while you were counting your Ukrainian money, this hillbilly was counting your crimes. And by my count, you're looking at about 300 years in federal prison. Hope that money was worth it. As Kennedy prepared for his final folder, Schiff slumped in his chair, finally broken. But there was one more revelation to come. And it would be the worst of all. John Kennedy stood slowly, his movements deliberate and almost ceremonial. The hearing room, despite being packed beyond capacity, fell into complete silence. Even the reporters stopped typing, sensing that something momentous was about to occur. Kennedy reached for his final folder, thinner than the others, but somehow more ominous. He held it for a moment as if weighing its contents, then looked directly at Adam Schiff. Congressman, he began, his voice gentle, but carrying an undertone of steel. I've been doing this little presentation in my country lawyer way, trying to keep things simple. But now I need to drop the act for just a minute. He removed his reading glasses and set them carefully on the table. When he looked up, the transformation was remarkable. Gone was the Foley, Louisiana lawyer. In his place sat a man with multiple degrees from Oxford and the University of Virginia Law School. A man who had argued cases before the Supreme Court. A man whose simple country lawyer persona was perhaps the most effective disguise in Washington. You see, Adam Kennedy continued, his accent noticeably diminished. While you were mocking my intelligence this morning, making your memes and entertaining your followers, I was thinking about something my constitutional law professor at Oxford once told me. He said, the most dangerous person in any room is the one everyone underestimates. He opened the final folder with precision. You underestimated me, Congressman. Fatal mistake. The first document he pulled out made Schiff's lawyer gasp audibly. It was marked with the highest classification levels and bore the seals of multiple intelligence agencies. This, Kennedy said, holding it up, is a joint counterintelligence assessment from the CIA, FBI, NSA, and DIA. The subject, you Congressman Schiff. It turns out you haven't just been a corrupt politician or even a simple foreign agent. You've been what we call in the intelligence community a double agent. The room erupted, but Kennedy raised his hand for silence. Let me explain for those who might not understand the terminology. A double agent is someone who pretends to work for one side while actually working for another. In your case, Congressman, you were pretending to work for America while actually working for, well, let's see who was paying you. He pulled out a chart that looked like a spiderweb of connections. Ukraine, we covered that. $8.7 million. Russia. Oh, yes. Despite your public position, you were taking Russian money. $3.2 million through various intermediaries. China. $5.1 million through that think tank you're secretly affiliated with. Iran. Yes, Iran. $2.3 million through Qatar. The numbers were staggering. Schiff had been taking money from America's adversaries and allies alike, playing all sides. But here's what made you special, Congressman. Kennedy continued. You weren't just selling intelligence to the highest bidder. You were creating chaos, setting these countries against each other, all while positioning yourself as the indispensable man in the middle. He pulled out a series of communications. These are intercepted messages between intelligence services discussing their American asset. The Russians thought you were working for them against Ukraine. The Ukrainians thought you were working for them against Russia. The Chinese thought you were undermining both for their benefit. And you were taking money from all of them. Kennedy's voice hardened. Do you know what we call that, Congressman? We call it treason. Multiple counts against multiple allies while serving on the Intelligence Committee. But Kennedy wasn't done. He pulled out another document. This one bearing the seal of the Department of Defense. This is the part that turns my stomach, he said, his voice dropping. This is a casualty report from a special operations mission in Syria last year. 5 American servicemen killed in an ambush. The mission was classified at the highest levels. Only 12 people in the entire government knew about it. He looked directly at Schiff. You were one of those 12. And according to signals intelligence, the enemy knew exactly where our men would be and when. They were waiting. The accusation hung in the air like a physical presence. We traced the leak, Kennedy continued. It went through 3 cutouts. 2 foreign intelligence services. But we traced it. It came from a burner phone purchased with cash in Arlington, Virginia. But you made one mistake. You activated it using your home Wi-Fi. Just once. Just for a minute. But once was enough. Schiff tried to stand, but his legs wouldn't support him. I didn't. I would never. Never. Kennedy pulled out a photograph. This is you at a dinner in Geneva, sitting next to the Syrian intelligence officer who received the information. This is his bank records showing a deposit of $500 the day after. This is your bank records showing a deposit of $450 3 days later. Kennedy's voice cracked with emotion. 5 American soldiers, congressmen, 5 heroes who thought their country was protecting them. They had families, children. They're dead because you sold their lives for money. He pulled out photographs of the fallen soldiers. Staff Sergeant Michael Thompson, 28. Father of 2. Sergeant First Class David Martinez, 31. About to be married. Sergeant Robert Kim, 26. Putting his sister through college. Corporal James Johnson, 22. On his first deployment. Specialist William Brown, 20. Hadn't even been home since basic training. Kennedy placed each photo carefully on the table facing Schiff. Look at them, Congressman. Look at the men you murdered for money. Schiff had begun to hyperventilate. His lawyer was demanding medical attention. But Kennedy wasn't finished. Oh, we're not done yet, he said, his voice now ice cold. See, that wasn't the only operation you compromised. By our count, you've leaked operational intelligence that led to the deaths of at least 17 American service members and 43 Allied forces. He pulled out a list. Every name, every family, every child who won't see their parent again because you decided their lives were worth less than your bank account. The hearing room was in absolute chaos. Several people were crying. The FBI agents were moving in, no longer waiting for permission. Kennedy pulled out one final item. A tablet. This, Congressman, is your coup press. It's a recording from your home office made by your own security system. You probably forgot it uploads to the cloud. The date is March 15th of this year. 3 days before that Syrian mission. He pressed play. Schiff's voice filled the room clear and unmistakable. The special ops mission is a go for the 18th. Grid coordinates are yes. I have them here. The price we agreed on was $500,000. I want it in the Swiss account, not the Cayman one. And remember, if anyone asks, I was never part of this conversation. Another voice heavily accented. And you're certain these coordinates are accurate? Schiff, I'm looking at the classified briefing right now. They'll be there at 0300 hours. Easy targets. Other voice. The payment will be made as agreed. Your continued cooperation is valuable. Schiff, just make sure it looks like intelligence failure, not a leak. I need to maintain my position. The recording ended. The silence that followed was deafening. Kennedy stood to his full height, looking down at Schiff with a mixture of disgust and pity. You didn't just betray your country, Congressman. You didn't just sell intelligence. You actively participated in the murder of American soldiers. You gave their positions. You counted your blood money while they bled out in the Syrian desert. He turned to the FBI agents. Gentlemen, I believe you have work to do. But before they could move, Schiff did something unexpected. He laughed. A broken, hysterical laugh that sent chills through everyone present. You think you've won? He gasped between laughs. You have no idea how deep this goes. How many others are involved? I'm just one player in a much bigger. Shut up, Adam. The voice came from the gallery. Everyone turned to see a woman standing. Schiff's wife. Just shut up. You've destroyed everything. Our children can't go to school. Our friends won't speak to us. And now I find out you're a murderer. 2. She looked at the FBI agents. Take him. I'm filing for divorce the moment he's in custody. And I'll testify to anything you need. I want immunity for our children and myself. We had no idea what he was. Schiff's laughter turned to sobs. Eve, please don't. Her voice was ice. Don't you dare. Those soldiers had families. 2. She turned and walked out. Her heels clicking on the marble floor. Kennedy began gathering his documents methodically. You know, Congressman, when you walked in here this morning, you thought you were going to humiliate a simple country lawyer. You live streamed. It made your jokes got your laughs. He closed the last folder. But while you were performing for your audience, I was performing an autopsy. An autopsy on your career. Your crimes. Your soul. What's left of it anyway? The FBI agents moved in handcuffs. Ready. Adam Schiff, the lead agent announced. You're under arrest for treason, espionage, murder, bribery, violation of the Foreign Agent Registration Act, and conspiracy to commit all of the above. You have the right to remain silent. Wait, Schiff cried out, struggling against the agents. Kennedy, you bastard. This was all a setup. You knew everything before I walked in here. Kennedy paused at the door and looked back. Of course I knew. Congressman, I've known for months. We all have. The FBI, the CIA, the entire intelligence community. We just needed you to be your arrogant self one more time. To attack me publicly on the record so I could destroy you completely. Legally. And permanently. He smiled that gentle smile one more time. You see, Adam, that's the thing about us hillbillies. We might talk slow, but we don't miss much. And we never forget. As Schiff was dragged from the room, screaming incoherently about conspiracies and setups, Kennedy turned to Chairman Graham. Mr. Chairman, I believe we're done here. Though, you might want to schedule some more hearings. Based on what Congressman Schiff started to say, he wasn't working alone. We've got a lot more corruption to root out. He picked up his readers and placed them back in his pocket. The simple country lawyer persona sliding back into place. Now, if you'll excuse me, all this talking has made me hungry. Anyone know where I can get some good gumbo around here? All this work makes a man nostalgic for home cooking. As he walked out, the hearing room erupted into chaos. Reporters scrambling to file stories. Senators demanding investigations. FBI agents coordinating with DOJ prosecutors. But John Kennedy just ambled toward the exit, humming a St. John tune under his breath. Behind him, Adam Schiff's political career lay in ruins. His freedom forfeit, his legacy destroyed. The man who had mocked the simple country lawyer had been systematically dismantled by one of the sharpest legal minds in the Senate. The last image captured by the cameras was Schiff being walked out of the building. His designer suit disheveled, his face stray with tears and sweat as protesters outside began chanting "Traitor, traitor." Inside, Kennedy had already moved on, chatting with a Capitol police officer about the best fishing spots on the PTOAC. The bayou had swallowed another predator. And John Kennedy hadn't even broken a sweat. Within hours, the political landscape of Washington, D.C. had been fundamentally altered. Had Schiff treason exploded across social media with over 50 million mentions in the first 2 hours. News networks scrambled to process the mountain of evidence Kennedy had presented, with panels of shocked experts trying to explain how the chairman of the Intelligence Committee had been a foreign agent and murderer. By evening, Speaker of the House Kevin McCarthy had called an emergency session. Adam Schiff's betrayal represents the darkest chapter in congressional history. He announced, "We will be conducting a thorough investigation of every member who had close ties to him." Democrats fled from Schiff like rats from a sinking ship. Nancy Pelosi, his longtime ally, issued a terse statement. "I am shocked and disgusted by these revelations. I never truly trusted Adam Schiff." Chuck Schumer went further. "Anyone who sells out American soldiers for money deserves the harshest punishment our justice system can deliver." At FBI headquarters, Director Christopher Wray held an emergency press conference. "Based on evidence presented today, we are opening investigations into 17 current members of Congress and 43 former officials. The corruption exposed today is just the tip of the iceberg. The financial fallout was immediate. Schiff's assets, All $19.3 million across various foreign payments were frozen. His homes in California and D.C. were raided with agents carrying out boxes of additional evidence. His wife, Eve, filed for divorce within 3 hours of his arrest, taking their children to her mother's house under protective custody. International reactions were swift and severe. Ukraine recalled 3 diplomats named in Kennedy's presentation. Russia expelled 2 American diplomats in retaliation for being exposed. China issued stern denials while quietly purging intelligence officers who had been in contact with Schiff. But perhaps the most powerful reactions came from the families of the fallen soldiers. Maria Thompson, widow of Staff Sergeant Michael Thompson, appeared on CNN that evening. "My husband died thinking he was serving his country. To find out, a congressman sold his life for money." She broke down crying. "I hope Schiff rots in hell." The Pentagon announced a full review of all operations Schiff had been briefed on, trying to assess the damage. Early estimates suggested he had compromised over 200 classified operations over his years of treachery. Meanwhile, John Kennedy had returned to his Senate office where his staff found him reading a French philosophy text. His feet up on his desk. "Senator," his chief of staff said, "the phone hasn't stopped ringing. Every network wants you. The president wants to speak with you. Foreign leaders are calling." Kennedy looked up mildly. "That's nice. Tell them I'm busy. Got some reading to catch up on." "But Senator, you just exposed the biggest traitor in American history." Kennedy shrugged. "I just did my job. Besides, the fish ain't biting themselves. I'm heading back to Louisiana this weekend. Maybe do some thinking on the bayou." That evening, as Washington continued to reel from the revelations, Kennedy issued a single statement. Today wasn't about politics or party. It was about truth and justice. Adam Schiff betrayed his country, and he got caught. That's how America is supposed to work. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got some constituents to serve and some fish to catch. The swamp's a little cleaner today. But there's still work to do. 6 months later, Adam Schiff was convicted on all charges. The judge, a veteran who had lost friends in combat, showed no mercy. "Mr. Schiff, you represent the absolute worst of what power can become. You sold American lives for money. You betrayed every principle this nation stands for." The sentence was life without parole to be served in ADX Florence, the supermax prison reserved for terrorists and traitors. As Schiff was led away, he passed a photo of the soldiers he had killed. Someone had placed it where he would have to see it. He would spend the rest of his life in a concrete cell 23 hours a day in solitary confinement with only his crimes for company. Back in Louisiana, John Kennedy was fishing on his favorite bayou, teaching his grandson how to tie a lure. When asked about the Schiff case, he just smiled. "Sometimes, son, the gators get too bold. Start thinking they own the whole swamp. That's when you got to remind them who really runs things around here. Now watch how I cast this line. The secret's all in the wrist." The boy nodded solemnly, not fully understanding, but knowing his grandfather had done something important. As the sun set over the Louisiana bayou, Kennedy reflected on the day's events. He'd been called a hillbilly, a fool, an inbred embarrassment, but when the dust settled, he was still standing, still serving, still fishing, and Adam Schiff, well, he'd learned the hard way that in the bayou, it's not the loudest gator that survives. It's the smartest. The end.